In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate 4 options for double increases. To jump right to a specific point in the video, use the chapter links down in the video timeline. So what I'm going to show you today is how to work 4 different types of double increases where you are turning 1 stitch into 3 stitches, and as you stack them up one row after another, you maintain a vertical line where the original stitch started, and the increases are coming out from that vertical line. And you can see they all have a slightly different appearance, and so I'm going to show you how to do each one of these. Some of them are easier than others. Now, you wouldn't have to use them only in a situation like this. I have a chevron type of pattern where I'm offsetting every double increase with a double decrease. This could be a situation where you start at the corner of a piece of knitting with just a few stitches, and then you are using double increases to create a much wider piece. What we're going to do, and I will demonstrate with the yarn held in the right hand as well, you are going to work 3 stitches into this single stitch by knitting it and not letting it come off the needle. I'm going to keep it on the needle. I'm going to hold it with my finger, with my thumbnail. Then I'm going to do a yarn over. Then I'm going to knit into that stitch again. So that will have turned the single stitch into 3 stitches. If you hold the yarn in your right hand, you would work this increase as follows. You'd insert as if to knit. You would then wrap the yarn and pull it through. And again, you would leave your stitch on the needle. You then wrap the yarn around the needle again as for a yarn over. And then you knit into that stitch again. And now you have 3 stitches where you originally had 1. So when you stack these increases on top of each other, what you see coming out to the angle to the right are the stitch that you knit, and what you see in the center is the yarn over, and then the second knit stitch is what gets created coming out that way. This next increase is called a central double increase, and it has the eyelets are much less obvious. You have kind of a dotted line look of knit stitches, and they're kind of a little bit more textural than the other line of increases that we just saw. So the way you do this increase is that the first thing you do is you knit through the back of the stitch. If you're familiar with a knit front back, this starts out similar, only you're going to knit through the back and then the front. So you enter through the back of the stitch, you wrap or pick the yarn as you would for any knit stitch and pull it through to the front. And again, you don't let this off the needle. You swing the tip around so that you can go through the front of the stitch. And again, you either wrap the yarn or you pick it however you normally knit to catch the yarn, and then you bring it through. So you have just created 2 stitches out of the first one. Now what you're going to do is you're going to look between these 2 stitches at the base, and you see there's like a vertical strand of yarn right there. You're going to take your left hand needle and you're going to come in from behind to lift that up onto the needle. I'm going to drop the yarn right now so you can see what I'm doing. So now you see how this stitch is sitting on the needle, and the leg that's closest to the tip is in the back. We call that the leading leg, and then the trailing leg, the leg that's further, is over the front. What we want to do is knit through the center of this stitch. So we're going through the back. We're not going through the front. So we come through the back like this, and then you pick or wrap the yarn however you would normally do it for a knit stitch and pull it through that loop and let that off the needle, and now you have 3 stitches where you used to have 1. This next increase is called a double lifted increase, and what this one is going to do is we are going to lift the leg of the stitch that's below the needle. So we're going to lift this left leg onto the needle. We're going to knit through that. Then we're going to actually knit the stitch that's on the needle, and then we're going to lift that left leg of the stitch below the needle and knit that, and that's how we're going to get our 3 stitches. The first thing you do is you take your right hand needle and you're going to lift that right leg of the stitch that's below the needle, and you're going to lift it on to the needle, and then you're going to knit this stitch that's been lifted onto the needle. So you're going to insert your working needle through the front of it, then you're going to wrap or pick the yarn as you would for any knit stitch and pull it through and let that come off the needle. Now this is that original stitch that had been on the needle, so now we're going to knit that. So you enter through the front and you wrap or pick as you would normally for any knit stitch. Let me get this. And then you let it come through and you let it come off the needle. And as it comes off the needle, the stitch that had been on the needle is now under the needle, and we are doing a lifted increase into the stitch that had been under the needle when it was over here. So it is now 2 rows below. So you're going to look at the leg that's 2 rows below now. So this one right here, not the one that's directly below the needle, but the one that's below that. I'm going to lift that up, and now we're going to knit that. And this leg is going to be kind of in the way here, but you're going to again knit through the center of that, so through the back like that, and then you will wrap or pick the yarn as you would for any knit stitch. And then as it comes off the needle, you now have 3 stitches where you used to have 1. This last one is called a double knit below increase. And the way you knit this one is you start out by knitting. You're going to knit through this stitch, keep it on the needle, knit into the stitch below, and then knit into the stitch that's on the needle again. And that's how you get your 3 stitches. So you're going to insert through the stitch on the needle. You're going to wrap or pick your yarn and complete the knit, but not let this stitch off the needle. You are then going to knit through this stitch that is below the needle. It looks kind of like a sort of a triangle. So you're going to go right through the center of that, wrap or pick the yarn as you would for any knit stitch. And then this is the tricky part, is coming through, pulling it back through where you went in initially. So now you've got 2 stitches. You're going to knit this stitch again to get your 3rd stitch. And now you've got your 3. If we compare these two, we compare the double lifted increase with the double knit below increase, what you'll see is that in this case we have those little holes that are creating that vertical line, but you almost don't see a stitch at all. What you see are these 2 increased stitches coming out of that hole, but you almost don't even see an actual stitch coming up this vertical column, or the stitch that comes up the vertical column maybe seems like it's behind these 2 stitches. Where if you look at this one, the one that's the double knit below, you can really see that there is kind of a column of stitches going up the center with the 2 stitches coming out. The double knit below creates what I think looks the most like an actual column of stitches. It kind of emulates the central double decrease closest in terms of appearance, whereas the others all create a very obvious vertical line that the new columns of stitches are coming out of, but they have more of this real eyelet look in various forms and various sizes. There are many ways to do double increases. The increases I demonstrated today are great options for projects that call for double increases that will be stacked vertically. They are all good choices for chevron patterns, but can be used in other situations as well. I encourage you to try out the increases I showed you today in a swatch to see which one you like best in terms of aesthetics and ease of execution. There are written instructions for the increases down in the video description. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.